Bob thought he could sleep peacefully, but guess what? The train had other plans. An avalanche hit the tunnel, and the heartbreak suddenly sent him flying out of bed. And that's not the end yet. The avalanche completely blocked the track, trapping the train in a Balkan canyon. Everyone was stuck waiting for help, and suddenly things got even crazier. Reckless butler brought breakfast in the zombie apocalypse, knocked on the door for ages with no reply. The door was locked tight, and a chill was coming from the vent. The doctor opens the door and says, "Ratchet stabbed, and the weapon? A sword." And the wounds were all over the place, like the killer was blindfolded or something. Time of death? Around 2 a.m. The conductor confirmed he was chilling in the hallway the whole time. Clearly, nobody could have noticed this were a classic locked room mystery. He begged Poirot to find the killer. As director of the Orient Express, Poirot couldn't accept a murder on his train, fearing damage to the company's reputation. Initially, he was reluctant to take the case. After all, he was on vacation, everyone needed chill time. But the request put all that in jeopardy. The train was stuck in Yugoslavia. If the local police showed up, forget the truth. They'd probably pin it on some random dude, maybe that black doctor or a foreign Poirot, a person who is deeply committed to the pursuit of justice. Such a situation was simply unacceptable. He made up his mind to initiate an investigation. Tool booked together all passengers in the dining car, climbed onto the roof to inspect around. After the avalanche, all doors were shut tight. There were no escape footprints anywhere. The killer was still on board, hiding among those 13 passengers. To avoid scaring the snake, Poirot spoke to Ratchet's secretary to gather intel and learned he was a top law student once. But sadly, he hit rock bottom due to alcohol and business failures, ending up working for Ratchet out of desperation. In his eyes, Ratchet was an absolute scoundrel, completely lacking in emotional intelligence and extremely demanding. If it weren't for the money, he wouldn't even be working for this jerk. When Poirot asked if Ratchet had any enemies, McQuaid simply pulled out a stack of threat letters. Clearly, those wanting Ratchet dead were definitely some scorned mobsters. With no useful leads, Poirot and Burke headed back to the room to examine Ratchet's body. Just think of Captain Jack from the Caribbean, who would have thought he'd meet his end on a train right after landing. With 12 stab wounds on Ratchet, the killer's technique was bizarre, some deep, some shallow, and what puzzled Poirot was that he heard nothing last night. He picked up a coffee mug from the floor, and then found a handkerchief with an embroidered H, but the real treasure was a pile of burnt paper in the ashtray. Buck was puzzled, what's the point? But Poirot said that's exactly what the killer thought too, which is why he left such an obvious clue. To normal folks, it's just trash, but for Poirot, anything left behind by the killer holds a deep secret. He could bring these secrets to light. Poirot grabbed an oil lamp, mixed the ashes with a wire mesh, and asked Burke to adjust the flame. As temperature rose, ashes reignited, revealing hidden words: "Blood on your hands, death awaits." At this moment, Poirot's brain was racing. After all, he was a world-renowned detective, spending his days either solving cases or studying bizarre ones. The clues he discovered reminded him of an old case, and he eventually figured out the true identity of the victim. It was a kidnapping case that shocked the entire nation. 2 years ago, the famous pilot Armstrong's 3-year-old daughter, Daisy, was kidnapped from home. The couple paid the ransom, but guess what? Daisy was still killed by the bad guys. After hearing this horror, the already fragile mother was overwhelmed with grief and ended up taking her own life. And the husband, unable to bear the news of his shattered family, chose to follow suit. Police found no evidence, so they randomly labeled the maid as the murderer, but she proved her innocence with her life. As for the mastermind, Gassetti, he bribed the judge and walked free. Poirot knew all this because Armstrong had written to him for help, but when he arrived, all he found was the man's corpse. So Poirot concluded it must be Armstrong's family seeking revenge, and those threatening letters were the strongest evidence. That's why Ratchet came to him for protection. He knew the killer was lurking among this crowd of passengers. Poirot entered the car and confronted the alleged witness, the woman who woke him up, Mrs. Harrell. She claimed that a man sneaked into her room in the dark last night. Subtitles. Poirot inquired about how she determined the gender, to which she replied that it was all thanks to her sixth sense. Poirot then made up his mind to inspect the door connected to Ratchet's room, seeking any clues from the previous night. She had locked the door, but when she woke up, it was wide open. Wildest part, she found a button on her bed. I found it right in my sleeping spot. What you name? Evidence. Thanks, Isabel. Slowly, one button isn't enough to name the killer. Poirot then went to speak with Ratchet's butler, Masterman. If anyone had slipped something into Ratchet's coffee, the butler would be the prime suspect. However, Masterman's answer raised some doubts for Poirot. He said he was terminally ill, in pain every night, and couldn't sleep. The co-room passenger could testify for him. Nevertheless, Poirot noticed some subtle details.